This is Gridiron Graduates, a weekly podcast covering all things football. Episode number 38, Stake Out. Recorded April 13th, 2016.
And hello again, friends. Welcome back. Back after a little bit of hiatus, but the Grid Grads, of course, are back in full effect, and glad to still have you guys with us. Billy said he hit you guys back up as always. Ian Wharton on the other side, my awesome co-host. Good to have you back, bud. How you been?
Been pretty good, man. Just we're about 2 weeks away from the big day for the draft. We've got NHL playoffs, which I'm a fairly casual NHL fan. I really like going to games, but as far as following the regular season, I don't follow too closely, just, lack of time, but I do really like the playoffs. And of course, we got NBA playoffs, which I'm a huge NBA fan. So the times are really good, man. Things are winding down here. I mean, they're ramping up in a sense, as far as, football is related, and obviously the draft is my personal favorite. But in the grand scheme of things, it's also, in a sense, slowing down as, most people have now seen a lot of these prospects. I'm not going too deep this year on prospects and such just because of, obviously my writing commitment. And so and it's also kind of indicative of the class overall. It's not a very strong class. It's kind of boring after the first 60 or so players. So, yeah, man, things are good, though. It's a great time of the year, one of my favorite times of the year for sure.
Yeah, no doubt. And, of course, we're recording this on the night that looks to be very historic in the NBA. The Warriors going for win number 73. It's hard to believe they actually made it to this point, especially with the way that, the couple losses the last couple weeks. But the big win at San Antonio put them in a position against what looks to be a struggling Grizzlies team, so they very well could get 73, and obviously by the time you guys listen to this, they will either have had 73 wins or they'll finish with 72. And then, of course, Mamba Day in Las Vegas. Or not Las Vegas, sorry, Los Angeles, as it's Kobe Bryant's final game, which is crazy to say. But tonight is Kobe Bryant's final day as an NBA player. What's that?
Yeah, you combine that with the NFL players who have retired this offseason.
Yeah.
And it's really incredible just to think like these guys that we definitely grew up with, some of the best players of our childhood, and no longer in the game. So obviously a couple of these guys were, kinds of shells of themselves here, but nevertheless, I mean, you still get used to seeing these guys, talking about these guys. Next couple of years will be a little bit different.
But by the way, Stanley Cup playoffs, go Flyers. Hopefully they can beat the Capitals.
I'm saying go Caps. So
we shall see what happens. But in any event, yes, the NFL draft is right around the corner. So we're going to talk a little bit tonight about the draft, kind of talk about some of the team needs and some potential player fits for some of these teams. And then, of course, next week is the big event for us. It will be the first annual Gridiron Graduates live mock, and I couldn't be more excited. The two of us will be hitting you guys up, along with John Ledyard of USA Today and the Draft Wire, and Sports Illustrated's Chris Burke. The four of us will be going through the entire first round, just running through the mock, and it's going to be an extremely fun time. I'm certainly looking forward to it. I've had this book for over a month now. When the two guys both said they were willing to jump on board, I was so happy. So next week's going to be really fun.
Yeah, definitely looking forward to that. It's always fun to do these. It's very unique. and you see a lot of different viewpoints and kind of strategies whenever we do something like this. So I'm really looking forward, especially with these two guys.
And then a couple other notes. We got word today that the regular season schedule is announced tomorrow night or tonight if you're listening on Thursday. Because only the NFL can make a 3-hour primetime special out of something you can look at in about 30 seconds.
Yeah, and like I last year on Twitter I had asked because I honestly didn't know. I said, what's the big deal about the schedule release? And a lot of diehard fans had responded, well, we like to travel to games, and the schedule release allows us to go book our flights and hotels and get that taken care of. And it's interesting because, I never really thought of that. But I'm with you here. Call me when it's over. I'll glance over it real quick. I'm going to watch every week anyways. So, for me personally, I don't go to games. I don't really like the in-person NFL experience. It's a long day. It's an expensive day as well. But, hey, respect to those that go to the games. You guys are great fans, obviously. I am not a great fan. I prefer the convenience and the comfort of my couch. But
that's right.
But definitely, it is a big day in the NFL just because of kind of what it marks in terms of the off season and setting the hype for next year, and we've kind of officially put 2016 or 2015, I should say, in the rearview mirror when that comes out.
Yep. So definitely be interesting to see. For one, what they put in the Thursday night opener against the Broncos. Could be the Colts because of Peyton Manning. Could be the Patriots. Could be the Texans because of Brock Osweiler. I personally think they're going to go with the Colts, but you never know. They could certainly surprise and maybe put a team like Oakland in that first game for the divisional aspect. And I think there's a pretty good chance. And I know our buddy Eric Edholm, friend of the show. He made his picks not too long ago of the Week 1 primetime games, and he has the Rams hosting the second Monday night game, and you have to think that's very likely going to happen. The NFL is probably going to promote the hell out of the fact that they're back in Los Angeles this season, so it would be perfect for them to put them in that Monday night slot. Of course, the downside is that game starts at about 10:15, so only about half of America is actually going to watch that entire game, let alone even stay up for it.
Yeah, and unfortunately, the half of Americans that stay up to watch it are going to be watching Case Keenum, barring any trade up in the draft, or maybe even getting lucky and getting one of these quarterbacks to fall for them. So it's as excited as I am that football's back in Los Angeles, and I really am, because I think that's I think it's a good thing for the sport. I just don't know, man. I don't know about watching it on opening weekend. It's as much as I love that NFL's back. That's a lot. Very late to stay up for a not very good quarterback situation. Good team, but not a good quarterback situation.
Yeah, it's almost like a rooting for them to get someone like Paxton Lynch.
Yeah,
to give us something to watch. But in any event, let's jump into it. That was actually a nice little segue to the draft talk. So I'll kind of get started talking about some of these teams and possible fits. We might as well start at the top. We've talked about the Titans before, talked about potential fits. I think it's starting to become a bit of consensus who they're going to take with that top pick. It sounds like it's going to be Laremy Tunsil, and certainly if they go with Tunsil, that definitely fills a need. You could put, you have your choice between Tunsil and Lewan at your bookend tackles. They would likely put Tunsil at left, Lewan at right tackle, and all of a sudden then your offensive line is definitely a lot better than it was last season. You still have Chance Warmack at right guard, who's one of my favorite players among offensive linemen. And the whole goal of this, of course, is to protect DeMarco Murray. No, I'm kidding. It's to protect Marcus Mariota, of course. But you brought in DeMarco Murray to help with the run game, and getting a guy like Tunsil would certainly help with that. If they don't go Tunsil, certainly Jalen Ramsey, and we're probably going to mention his name a couple times tonight as potential fits for a lot of these teams because he's just that athletic of a player and can fit really any scheme. So if Tennessee goes with Ramsey, all of a sudden you have a playmaker in that secondary. And let's face it, this Titans team can use pretty much all the help they can get. There's holes pretty much throughout the roster. So Ramsey certainly would be a good fit. I know there was a lot of talk about Bosa potentially as the top pick, but that talk's kind of seemed to die down a bit. It seems like Tunsil and Ramsey are probably the two favorites to be selected with that number one pick. Assuming the Titans keep the pick, certainly there's going to be talk, and with this being smokescreen season, you're going to get more of that talk as we get closer to the draft, but there is talk that the Titans may trade the number one pick.
Yeah, I think, you're right. Like that's similar to what I've seen as well. That Tunsil is going to be the favorite if they keep the pick, but from what Jason Lockenfora from CBS was saying is that they apparently do have a couple good offers that they feel like they can work with, maybe squeeze a little bit more out of to trade down, which I don't think that's the right decision. This is a team desperately lacking talent. I don't think building depth is the right way to add that talent. And what you're talking about is adding maybe like a third or fourth round pick. Quite frankly, that player is not likely to make a huge impact. It's just the reality of the draft. Now, it's certainly possible they could get a good player there. A good scouting department, a good coaching staff will find a good one there. But it's a 50-50 chance. I would rather take that elite player at number one overall, whether it be Ramsey, whether it be Tunsil. If you take Tunsil, you got to figure out what to do with Taylor Lewan, which one plays right tackle. It's not an easy transition to go from one side to the other. You're changing the complete mechanics of the body and the muscle memory. But that being said, if it works out, you've got yourself a great bookend pair, and I think that that's very valuable. And I would go with Tunsil personally. I like Jalen Ramsey a lot, but I think Tunsil is the best prospect. Quite frankly, I think he's the best prospect I've scouted in 4 years. So, I mean, I think that counts for something, especially with a rookie quarterback. Or I should say second-year quarterback now, but obviously Mariota was a rookie last year.
Yeah, for sure. So, definitely a lot of ways the Titans can go, and it'll be really interesting to see what direction they go with a couple weeks to go. So assuming Tennessee does go Tunsil and, makes it not as dramatic as we're expecting it right now, the real drama is going to begin at number 2 with the Cleveland Browns. We're expecting them to take a quarterback. They could certainly surprise us and take a different position. Again, maybe a Jalen Ramsey, maybe whoever else they may consider. But the likely question for the Browns is, will they take Carson Wentz or will they take Jared Goff? And you mentioned Jason LaCanfora, and I believe there was a report today saying that if if Hugh Jackson got his way, I think that's the name he mentioned. If he got his way, then Jared Goff is actually going to be the pick over Carson Wentz, even though the Browns scouts favor Carson Wentz. So,
yeah,
I mean, it's pretty much a foregone conclusion at this point that if they either use that second pick or they use the 32nd pick, the first pick of round 2, on a quarterback, more likely they'll have to take it at number 2 because, I mean, yeah, you signed Robert Griffin III, but does that really solve the quarterback issues? They got to bring in someone to at least compete with RG3. At the very least, sit behind Griffin for some time while they develop.
Yeah. Yeah, and the thing is, and I agree with taking Goff, by the way. I think this went from a good situation to a young quarterback to a difficult one. Obviously, letting their free agents walk and not retaining any of them is very difficult to overcome, especially Mitchell Schwartz. Just some very poor decisions by a new management that I think it's going to come back to haunt them. But nevertheless, I'm a big Jared Goff fan. I think he's going to be a Pro Bowl caliber quarterback, top 12 type quarterback in the league. And, some people will disagree. Scouts will disagree. He's got his flaws, that's for sure. I don't think he's ready right now to play ideally. The Browns don't have to play him right now. They're also a team that could use impact star talent, kind of like Tennessee. But at the end of the day, is if they feel like one of these quarterbacks can be their future, Pro Bowl guy, you got to take him. And I'm not a Wentz guy, really. I think Wentz is decent. Let me put it that way. I don't like him at his current price. I don't think he's first round good. I think he needs a couple years to sit. He can execute very basic things, and that's not, to me, worth a first round pick. That's just my interpretation of what that pick means. Mentally and physically he's ready, but mentally he is not. And that's where Jared Goff is just much more natural, much more advanced, and I think he just has a better upside too because of that. I think he does things with his intangibles and natural feel for the game that Carson Wentz has never showed. To me, that matters. So if I'm the Browns, I'm picking between three players here. I'm either taking Jared Goff, I'm taking either Jalen Ramsey, or I'm taking Joey Bosa. Because those are three positions that are premier positions. If you have a star at one of those three positions or all three of those positions, especially if it's all three of those positions, you've got yourself a Super Bowl contender in most instances. So I don't think Bosa's maybe like a superstar, but I think he's a very, very good player, and they could definitely use a player like him. Ramsey is a rare safety type player. I like him at safety. They may like him at cornerback, but I like him at safety. So, I think they're in a really good position. If they trade down, again, same thing with Tennessee. I just don't think that's the right decision for them. But I would really like it if they take Goff. I don't like it at all if they like Wentz. I just think that's reaching on a player that needs more time than what, they need to be devoting to that type of player.
Yeah, and I've been saying for a while, it just felt like this Wentz hype train, really went off the rails. Quite some time ago, and obviously it has not stopped.
Yeah. And the weird thing is that like a week or two ago, I forget who wrote the article, but there were some quotes from GMs earlier in the year. I think it was from Adam Schefter. And they had admitted that the GMs were excited about adding this guy on day 2 of the draft because they didn't think the other teams would really be on him.
Mm-hmm.
Like that tells you that he's a day 2 pick. Like that was the evaluation with him. And quarterbacks are always going to be pushed up a little bit, but you can't force the pick by 2 full rounds to the number 2 overall pick. Like it just doesn't make sense. It's baffling to move Wentz up like that. He threw 600 career passes at the FCS level, and he was playing at like the Alabama of FCS schools. Like he seems like a good, smart kid. There's things that he does well. You love his size, you love his athleticism, of course. But as a quarterback, I mean, he's not really anything special. He didn't show anything special. Maybe he'll become something special, but that's a huge projection, and I don't understand the hype on him. Really, I don't.
Well, it should be interesting, and considering they're the Browns, God only knows what they're thinking, especially with a baseball mind running the show there now. Maybe they'll draft David Wright by accident. San Diego then is up at number 3, and they're an interesting team. I'll let you take the reins on this one first. Looking at the Chargers, what are your thoughts on them right now with that 3rd pick?
So San Diego, I think that this is going to be the spot where you maybe see DeForest Buckner, or you're going to see maybe Jalen Ramsey if he's somehow still on the board, maybe Joey Bosa. I think those are probably the 3 guys that I think are likely. Buckner seems to be the guy that it just sticks out to me. Like we've seen reports that Buckner probably goes ahead of Bosa, and if that's the case, then this is where he's going to go. They are similar to the first 2 teams, where they've just been ravaged the last couple of years of talent. They just severely lack it throughout the roster. And obviously with Phillip Rivers in the fold, you need guys who can play right now, who are impact players, and this is a class that's not filled with those guys. So I think Buckner makes sense. I personally would take Bosa. I think Bosa's just a better player. But I like Buckner a lot. You're paying a bit of a premium for a player who, isn't a great 5 technique in their scheme, but he's a fit there. It's not that he's not a great fit. It's just generally you don't see players that play his position go that high. But that's just kind of this class. And so I think it's a good pick. It's a safe pick. But it's a guy that gets on the field right away for them in a position that they desperately need help at. Jalen Ramsey, I think, is the ideal pick after losing Eric Weddle, but don't hold your best breath, Chargers fans, if he falls there. I mean, you rush to the podium, but I think you go in with the expectation of adding Buckner, and you're fine, and you're just absolutely thrilled if you can get Ramsey.
Yeah, and I feel, there's a bit of a connection there too now between Buckner and the Chargers. It seems like the Chargers are pretty high on him, and he would certainly fill a need. They lost Kendall Reyes in free agency, so he can come in and play on the end of that line and help that defense. Ramsey, like you said, would be the perfect replacement for Eric Weddle. So it'll be really interesting to see what the Chargers do with that third pick. And then you move down to Dallas at 4. And this is a spot I also think Joey Bosa can go because, I think interior D-line help is what Dallas needs, is one of the things Dallas needs right now. When Bosa's sitting there at that 4th pick, especially knowing that they won't have Randy Gregory for the first 4 weeks of the season and not re-signing Greg Hardy, they're going to need some pass rush help, and they can get that with Bosa. Again, I know we've mentioned Ramsey, about a million times already in just the last few minutes, but he's that kind of player that can really transform any defense, it feels. Especially a team like Dallas who can use secondary help. I mean, Flowers and Claiborne have been a little underwhelming. I know they re-signed Claiborne, but how excited can you really be about that? I know they want to try to get Byron Jones up and at him eventually, but you bring in Ramsey and pair him with Byron Jones. That's a lot of speed in that secondary.
Yeah, a lot of versatility too. And the reason why you mentioned Ramsey so much is that, one, every team needs defensive back help. Every single team. There's not one team in the league that couldn't use either a cornerback or a safety. Number 2 is that's just how good Jalen Ramsey can be, how special he is as an athlete and as a playmaker. So that's why, I think this is his floor. I think his worst case scenario is Dallas at number 4. But I'm with you here. I think this is a spot for an Ohio State player. And Joey Bosa, to me, makes a lot of sense. I also think Ezekiel Elliott makes a lot of sense here. The common argument against Ezekiel Elliott is going to be, well, running backs aren't valued that high. Which, that's partially true, partially false. If you look at the last 50 running backs, so in the last 10 years, there have been 50 running backs who have finished in the top 10 of rushing yards. And that doesn't seem like a lot because a lot of those running backs are repeating year after year. Of those backs, 32 of those backs were picked in the first 2 rounds of the draft. So a large majority of them are coming with a high investment. So that's telling you that impact backs go early. It's very difficult to find very good backs later than round 2. Not saying that there aren't those backs, but it's more common that they're taken highly. So it makes sense to invest a high pick in running back. And I used to not be that guy. A year ago, I thought differently. I did the research. I saw the research brought forward to me by others as well. And the evidence is there that investing highly in a running back is not a bad investment. You just have to nail the evaluation. And I think Elliott's a great running back. I think he'll be a Pro Bowl running back as soon as he starts his career as a rookie. So the argument for Dallas is saying, well, yeah, they've got this great offensive line. They got Tony Romo. We can get away with an average running back. Yeah, you probably could. But what if you added a great running back? How good would the running attack be then? And I would argue that with Tony Romo in the fold, you probably have a 5-year window at most, maybe even less. So you need to be as good as you can possibly be during that window. Because after that window, you're going to be rebuilding anyways, at least a little bit, even if you take your quarterback of the future, and everything goes perfectly, and that quarterback of the future is ready to go year 1 or year 2 of his starting career and jumps right in and plays well, you're still going to need a really good running back. And there's still going to be a transition period there. So I think taking a running back like Elliott would be a home run pick who instantly transforms your offense, and he's going to be a mainstay for the next 6-7 years until he gets his upper 20s and maybe even 30s. I think he's the best overall player outside of Tunsil in this draft. And I think he's easily the best offensive playmaker in the draft. So I think it's a great pick at number 4. So I would go between either one of those Ohio State players.
Yeah, and I tend to agree with you there. Having Elliott, if I'm a Cowboys fan, would make me a lot more excited than relying on guys like Lance Dunbar, Darren McFadden. If you can add a playmaker to that offense and try to alleviate some of the pressure off of Des Bryant and Jason Witten, and obviously keep Tony Romo healthy, then all of a sudden there's your strong offense again, and Dallas is right back in the thick of the NFC East. So it would not surprise me if they took Elliott with that 4th pick, because there's certainly holes all over the roster, so there's a number of ways they can go. And speaking of Ohio State, they actually there's 25 prospects that are going to be attending the draft. 5 of them are from Ohio State, which I'm sure makes you pretty happy.
Absolutely.
Other than Bosa and Elliott, you've got Eli Apple, you've got Taylor Decker, and you've got Darren Lee. All seem like they could potentially be first-round picks.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really strong group from Ohio State. It's basically a legendary recruiting class. A lot to like about a lot of these guys. I'm not probably the lowest on Eli Apple, the cornerback. Not that he's a bad player, but I just think he is the furthest to go as far as development. But I think we're going to see a number of special contributors early in their career, and unique roles too. These are very unique players, especially Lee and Bosa. They're not your typical players for their position. So I think this is a really good group.
Yeah, for sure. So it should be good for Ohio State. Could be a very good Thursday night for those in Buckeye Land. So let's move on. We'll talk about a team with the 5th pick, a team that I still feel is on the rise, and also feel that this has to be the year, or it is probably the end of Gus Bradley. That is the Jacksonville Jaguars. I'm doing a bit of a mock draft myself, and this is actually where I have Jalen Ramsey at number 5. And if you're the Jaguars and you can get Jalen Ramsey at number 5,
oh boy, yeah, that'd be huge.
It would be, wow.
And you know what though? The thing is that with the draft, I say this all the time. It is the most unpredictable event of the year.
Absolutely.
So you can't sit there and say, well, there's no chance that happens. Well, there's a lot of things every year that happen that you would sit there and say that, and then you look at it at the end of the night, end of the first round, and you're like, oh my gosh, like it did actually happen. So, this is a great fit as well. And in terms of scheme fit and instant impact this and the Cowboys would probably be the best fit for him overall. And especially Jacksonville being aggressive this offseason, trying to make this be a winning season for once. I think they've come a long ways. I like what they've done this offseason. Adding Ramsey would really be the cherry on top.
Mm-hmm. Now let's say, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
All right. Let's say Ramsey is off the board. He does go in one of those first 4 picks. Could a guy like Miles Jack be a possibility for Jacksonville, or maybe, I don't know, even an offensive tackle, say Ronnie Stanley?
Well, I don't think they'll go offensive tackle just because they've invested at the position recently. But I do think that you're on something there with Miles Jack. Now, personally, I would not take Miles Jack this high. He's a good prospect to me. I don't think he's a superstar. A lot of concerning things on film. I think the idea of Miles Jack is better than who Miles Jack currently is as a player. A lot of projection with him over what he actually is. And so we'll see if he ends up reaching there. But I think he's a good prospect still. I think he's the likely pick if Ramsey's gone, just because this team really lacks athleticism in the secondary and at the linebacker position. And it was reported they would use him as like a hybrid safety linebacker, which is a good role for him, I think. That's the right role for him to succeed. And again, that's the point. You want him to succeed and put him in a position to do well. And I think he's definitely a consideration. I also think Shaq Lawson, the defensive end from Clemson, should be a consideration here as well, because this team still needs pass rush help.
And I believe, was it Miles Jack you wrote in your 50 predictions, which, by the way, if you guys are listening, you should check out because he did great work on it. I believe it was Jack you wrote in your predictions will be announced as a safety. Is that correct?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Thought so. So there you go. That's possible, and then that would be a unique position, and certainly a nice chess piece for Gus Bradley to use. Real quick too on Jack, I think I read somewhere. I don't know if it might not have been here, but I remember reading some article talking about Miles Jack and kind of comparing him to the last couple of linebackers we saw come out of UCLA in Eric Kendricks and Anthony Barr, and they were saying Jack might actually be the best of the 3. What's your take on that?
I would actually say he's the least impressive of the 3. I was high on Barr. I had a first-round grade on him. I had a first-round grade on Eric Kendricks. So, it's not a diss. And I've got a first-round grade on Miles Jack as well. Right. So, I'm not sitting there trying to bash the guy. I think he's a weak side linebacker, and that's literally the least valuable position on a defense. Mm-hmm. You can find those guys day 3. You can find athletic, undersized. Now, he's not undersized, but, generally speaking, you can find athletic players like that, maybe not to his athleticism, but what's the difference between him and maybe like a regular weak side linebacker? It's really not that big. Like the drop off from him to an average weak side linebacker is not going to be that big. You're not going to have him covering slot receivers very often because he's not going to be playing BYU anymore. He's going to be playing Julian Edelman and Demaryius Thomas. He's not going to cover those guys. I'm sorry. He has no chance of covering them. So I don't think I think he's a chess piece that you can use and you can get a lot of cool usage out of him and helpful usage out of him, but I just don't think he's, I saw someone say he's like a faster version of Ray Lewis. That's a Hall of Fame comparison.
It's interesting, yeah.
I don't understand. He wasn't a middle linebacker in college. He was a safety and slot linebacker. It's strange to me why we're projecting him to play these instinctive positions when it's not. He didn't play instinctive positions. He played reactive positions, and that's okay. But it's a part of the evaluation process to understand the role he played and what he does well and what's going to be projection. It's okay if you project him to be Bobby Wagner, in the NFL, but just understand that's not what he did in college.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a stretch to say that he will be that in the NFL.
Right. Moving on in the top 10, the Ravens sit at number 6, and to me, they're another interesting team. You know, they had a lot of injuries last season, which led to them going just 4-12. Honestly, they're a bit of a hard team for me to figure out as far as where they could go. You know, maybe Jack is a possibility if he's there. Maybe they could use some rush help, some corner help. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah,
They seem interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, they are going to reap the benefit of whoever falls, especially if there's two quarterbacks that go before them. So here I'm looking at DeForest Buckner. I think this is Buckner's floor. I think his range is going to either be San Diego, Dallas, or Baltimore. I don't think he escapes those picks. Or Joey Bosa. Joey Bosa makes a lot of sense here. Instant impact player. Bolsters that defensive line. They had a lot of injuries on that defense the last couple of years. Let's add a young talent who can come in right away and play a specific role and start. I think he's a great fit for them. Beyond that, if those two guys are off the board, gets really interesting. And maybe they do take Miles Jack, although they already have a similar player in Arthur Brown, who's a similar prospect. Even though he hasn't played, that may make them weary of similar players to Jack. They have a need at cornerback, but it's too early to take a cornerback, I think. Just a little early. I don't think Vernon Hargraves is worth a top 6 pick. He's a good player, but I don't know if he's worth that high of an investment. So, and it's funny because in 2 picks I'll probably talk about a cornerback, but just overall for them right now, I think that they're going to take that trench talent. Or if Laramie Tunsil doesn't go number 1, I think this is probably his landing spot. He could slide all the way down to 6 if he doesn't go number 1. And then I think it's an easy decision for Baltimore to just snatch him up.
Yeah, especially after losing Osemele. You could just plug him right in at left tackle. Would be interesting, though, if Tunsil gets past Tennessee. San Diego would probably take a look at him, I think, and maybe kick King Dunlap over right. But yeah, definitely Baltimore could be a landing spot if Tunsil were to fall, which certainly would be surprising, but then again, we should expect the unexpected. Yeah,
definitely. Which is weird to say that Tunsil could fall to 6, considering he's so good.
Yeah.
But that's just kind of, the way it's been. And even with San Diego, they re-signed Joe Barksdale, their right tackle, to a 4-year contract. So they're invested at that. Yeah, they're invested along the offensive line. Even though it's not a good offensive line, they're invested in that. So they're not. I don't think they're going to take him. So maybe you see like a trade up or something even from someone else.
San Francisco sits at number 7, and I really think they're going to go quarterback here. Probably whoever Cleveland doesn't pick at number 2, I think San Francisco could easily gobble up at 7 because, let's face it, they've made things... We would think things are a bit awkward now between them and Colin Kaepernick with all the trade reports that have been going on. And God knows Blaine Gabbert is not a good quarterback, especially if we're talking about a Chip Kelly offense. So Jared Goff definitely is a possibility here. I know you've talked in the past that Jared Goff... I remember even asking you once during the season, like, hey, is Jared Goff a fit for Chip Kelly? And you said, yeah, he is. But that was when Chip Kelly was still with the Eagles. Now he's with the 49ers. And lo and behold, Goff is potentially going to be sitting there at number 7.
Yeah, I think that's ideal. I think either Paxton Lynch, Memphis quarterback, or Jared Goff are the easy decision here. Goff is, I just think, so perfect for Chip Kelly. He's incredibly smart. He's experienced. He can go vertical. He can do the short, underneath stuff. He is smart in the pocket. He's accurate to all levels. he's gained significant muscle since the end of last year. Even if you watch like the quarterback camp with John Gruden, he looks huge. Like he looks really built. He might be up to 215, 220 pounds, and he looks at his upper body looks much bigger than last year. That being said, would I like him to sit a year? Yeah, absolutely. But if there's one offense that he's going to go to and maybe be able to play right away, it would be here with Chip Kelly. I think he'd be a home run pick. Similar story for Paxton Lynch, though. I mean, I really think he needs to sit a year to maximize his growth potential. But, I mean, if you put him with Chip Kelly, now you're going to change the offense a little bit. It's going to be a little bit more of it'll still be a vertical offense. It won't be as much of a West Coast offense. You can't really do quite as much with him. He's still pretty accurate, but you want to use his athleticism, and the way that you're going to maximize his athleticism is by going vertical. And he's a much better version of Colin Kaepernick, which they already have on their roster. So if I'm San Francisco, I'm trying to trade Colin Kaepernick for a mid-round pick, and I am taking my quarterback of the future at number 7.
Yeah, and I definitely agree there. So, like I said, if one of the two quarterbacks is, or even like you said, Lynch very likely be sitting there too. I would say one of those two is probably going to be the pick.
Yeah.
Philadelphia at number 8. Offensive line, definitely a need. Ronnie Stanley will be sitting there. Cornerback could be a need. You know, they re-signed Nolan Carroll. Could certainly use a third guy between him and Eric Rowe. You know, a number of ways they could go. Receiver, they could possibly go. Maybe this is Ezekiel Elliott's spot as well if Dallas doesn't take him at 4. They're another team, and the trade rumors are swirling around this team as well, that maybe they're going to be a team that moves up for one of those quarterbacks. So yeah. I think Philadelphia is definitely going to be a team to watch once the draft gets here.
Yeah, there's a lot of noise around this team. There's rumors that they can move up to number 1 to take Carson Wentz or Jared Goff. Mm-hmm. There's rumors they could move up to number 2 for Ezekiel Elliott. So I don't know whether it's them leaking this information, whether it's someone else. They're clearly interested in the quarterbacks and Ezekiel Elliott. I think that much is true. I think they're going to come away with this draft with either a quarterback or Zeke. And, I love Ezekiel Elliott, obviously, but for them, I don't know if taking him is the right decision. You know, this is a team they've had premier running backs in the recent past, and they've traded him away. Now, obviously, that was Chip Kelly. But they have Ryan Matthews. I just don't know what this team's needs. They just recently heavily invested in a quarterback. Granted, they're short-term deals with Sam Bradford and Chase Daniel, but I don't understand why you would make that investment and then trade up or even take a quarterback top 10. What was the point of taking Chase Daniel if you're going to draft a quarterback top 10? So that seems a little strange to me. Ezekiel Elliott, again, he's such a good player. I wouldn't complain if they took him. I really wouldn't. Selfishly, I hope he falls past them, because if he falls past them, I think he could land in Miami. But it makes sense. I don't know if it's the best fit for what their current needs are. Not that running back isn't a need. You're picking top 10 with this roster. This roster to me doesn't say it needs running back. It says it needs receivers. It needs maybe some help along the defensive front, maybe another body up front, maybe even a secondary member. They could definitely use another cornerback. Mm-hmm. So I think this would be a good chance here. I would probably look at cornerback, maybe Vernon Hargraves or William Jackson.
And I know they were looking at Nick Fairley a little bit a couple weeks ago in free agency. Fairley, of course, signed with the Saints. But it does show that, they're maybe looking for some more bodies behind Fletcher Cox. Yeah, there's all the trade rumors surrounding Fletcher Cox and the report that he supposedly turned down a huge contract. But, he's still under contract for this season. I think eventually they're going to get a deal done. A couple notes, too. one regarding Zeke. I think it was Sam Monson on Twitter, Pro Football Focus, that said that Zeke's comparison in the NFL is Ryan Matthews. So when I saw that, I'm sitting thinking, okay, well, if he's Ryan Matthews, then why would the Eagles draft a Ryan Matthews-like player at number 8 if they already have Ryan Matthews? You know, unless...
Yeah, I don't know if that's really a great comp either. Yeah, that seems like it's a little bit off to me. But nevertheless, I mean, Matthews was a really good prospect coming out of college. He was, you know, and maybe that's where the comp is that as prospects, they're similar because Matthews has been hurt so many times now. He's just a different back. He's not a bad back, but he's just so different now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point though. I mean, again, do you need to invest a premium pick into a position where you have a decent starter and you've got some depth there with Darren Sproles? I almost think like you could wait till next year, which is a loaded running back draft class, and you know, spare yourself that elite pick this year.
Mm-hmm. And then, of course, for quarterbacks, you know, they've definitely met and talked with pretty much all the top guys. I think they've talked with Wentz, they've talked with Goff, Lynch, Hackenberg. So they're doing their due diligence at the very least. Who knows, if they don't come away with a quarterback in round 1, maybe round 3. And of course, all the talk about the trade up, there's one key issue here, and that's they don't have a second round pick. So where's the ammunition going to come in? If they make a trade up, they're in all likelihood going to have to get rid of next year's first. So otherwise, they're going to have to get pretty creative if they want to make a move up.
Yeah, absolutely.
9 on the board is Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay certainly a team on the rise. Dirk Cutter now a head coach. Re-signed Doug Martin, so you could see the offense starting to build. Pass rush, I think, is definitely a direction they can go here. You know, certainly can go with one of the Clemson defensive ends, Shaq Lawson or Kevin Dodd. That to me right now feels like their biggest need is defensive end. Maybe get a little bit of pass rush, especially in the division where, you know, you're still facing Drew Brees twice a year. You're facing Matt Ryan. You're facing Cam Newton. So wouldn't hurt to have a little bit of pass rush down in Florida there.
Yeah, I agree. I think defensive end and maybe cornerback. Now, to be brutally honest with you, I would take an offensive tackle here. I don't like their offensive line that much, currently constructed. I love Ali Marpet. He's a fantastic young guard. But Donovan Smith at left tackle to me is an issue. And I know that Buccaneers fans are a little defensive about him. It's okay, guys. It's all right. They were yeah, I said something about him, and a couple of their writers had said, hey, you know, he did pretty good down the stretch. So I went back and watched. So he's pretty brutally bad. He is not a good left tackle. He wasn't a good left tackle in college either. He's a guard to me. He needs to kick inside and play left guard. I would add a guy like Taylor Decker here or Ronnie Stanley. And I think that you could really set up Jameis Winston for the future and be very successful with the pick like that. But like I said, there are also needs at cornerback and defensive end. So again, those are premium positions. So as long as you walk away with using one of those top 10 picks on that premium position, I wouldn't complain one bit.
Just to be on the safe side.
Good call.
Alright, so Got through the Bucks. Now we're on to the Giants. So moving on, rounding out the top 10 is a team that seems like they have a lot of holes, like we talked about earlier with the Cowboys, and of course it's the NFC East. So it feels like the NFC East has a lot of holes they have to fill roster-wise. But the New York Giants need help all over the place. Let me, off the top of my head, I'm thinking offensive line. I'm thinking probably receiver, secondary, linebacker, defensive end. Whew, it's almost like no matter where they go, they can't go wrong with this 10th pick. Yeah, just about anybody they can go with, or anybody that could be there. Shaq Lawson, Hargraves, Treadwell, maybe Will Fuller. I don't know. Name almost anybody you want. The Giants can use them because they need all the help they can get at this point.
Yeah, definitely. And instead of rebuilding this roster the right way, they're going to have to, draft really well, which General Manager Jerry Reese has not done in recent years. They need a running back. They need a wide receiver. They need offensive line help. They might be set along the defensive line. They could probably use some depth after spending, $200 million there. But they could definitely use some depth in later rounds. And then they could use linebacker help desperately. And they need a free safety. They need a cornerback. So, I mean, like you said, pick your poison here. I don't think I spend this on an offensive position. I'd probably take a tackle. Like, I don't take an offensive playmaker. I'd take a tackle. Marshall Newhouse is going to be their starting tackle. So this, to me, seems like the right spot for either Taylor Decker or Ronnie Stanley. Maybe Jack Conklin, although I'm not a big fan of his. You got to take an offensive tackle here. Protect Eli Manning. Try to get that run game going a little bit better. And that happens with a new left tackle. It also allows Eric Flowers to move back to his more natural right tackle position, too.
Mm-hmm. Then we are at Chicago at 11. Wouldn't it be interesting if Chicago winds up with Kendall Fuller to pair with his brother Kyle Fuller? But probably too high for this pick, it seems. I'm not seeing a lot of Kendall Fuller talk in the first round, but I could certainly see the Bears going cornerback. Maybe this is a spot for Vernon Hargraves. Maybe you look at receiver. Obviously they tagged Alshon Jeffrey, and they're hoping Kevin White comes back from injury. Maybe you grab someone to fill the third spot. Don't think they go running back here. I think they're pretty high on Jeremy Langford. I think they're excited and ready for him to take over for Matt Forte. They could certainly add some depth along the offensive line and maybe a little bit on that front seven. So Chicago, another interesting team, sitting at number 11 there.
Yeah, I mean, they've built this defense nicely over the last 2 years in free agency. They might be in a position, if a quarterback falls, they might be in a position to take their quarterback to the future right now. They do need cornerback help. Jason Monkenfour did predict that Kendall Fuller will get into the first round somewhere, but I agree, 11's too high. I think you're going to maybe see him at the end of the first round, which, by the way, still seems really high for a limited athlete coming off of microfracture surgery, which is a considerably severe knee surgery. But for those that don't know, basically, there's no cartilage left. They use blood. They drill into the bone, and they use blood to seal that and to almost act as like a protective barrier. So it's kind of bizarre how that works. It usually does not lead to long-term success or recovery. It's basically like a last-ditch effort to save the knee. And usually players, and Amari Stoudemire in the NBA was a good example of this, usually you'll see a guy play well for maybe like 2, 3, maybe 4 years after. And it's uncommon in football that it happens, but in basketball it's usually, the beginning of the end for sure. So So it'll be interesting to see, where he goes. But I agree with you here, Chicago. I think they've got a lot of options. I would specifically look at edge rushers. I think Noah Spence would be a really good pick here. I also would not be surprised to see the best available corner come off the board here either. And then, like I said, with my dark horse pick would be quarterback.
It would be interesting, especially, Jay Cutler doesn't have a big window left. Hell, if he didn't have that huge contract, Chicago very well could have got rid of him. But, of course, he was sort of risen from the ground last season with Adam Gase. But, of course, Adam Gase is no longer there. But they're hoping that continuity and bringing up the offensive coordinator, or the quarterback's coach to offensive coordinator, can still help Cutler. But, yeah, you might want to start thinking down the road a little bit if you're Chicago. And at 12, a team that's kind of in that similar position as far as quarterbacks go, and that's the Saints. They drafted a quarterback in the third round last year, but there's still talk that they may look at quarterback in this draft. Wide receiver seems to be a position that's being pegged to the Saints a lot. So maybe almost any of the top guys, Laquan Treadwell, Will Fuller, Josh Doxson. So
yeah, and interestingly enough, I can't remember who mentioned it, but they had mentioned that Garrett Grayson, the guy that they took last year, they took him in the third round, but they had him pegged as a backup quality player. So they don't view him as like the long-term succession plan to Drew Brees, which is really weird, by the way, why they'd take a guy like that in the third round, considering all the holes they have on their roster. But that kind of helps encapsulate the poor roster management that this regime has had over the last several years. But nevertheless, they have a chance here to add an impact player, someone who can start right away, whether it be Laquan Treadwell, whether it be Josh Doxson, or if they go on defense, which I would recommend, defensive line. They could certainly use pass rushers. They could use defensive tackles as well. They could use even a linebacker. So, they have a lot of ways they could go. They could use a corner as well. So, I don't rule out any position here. I take the best available player. That may end up being, I think this is the floor for Vernon Hargreaves. If I'm them, I think that would be a guy that if he's still on the board, makes a lot of sense because he can play right away. But I also don't rule out a wide receiver to help fill the shoes of Marcus Colston.
We're just going to run through quick the rest of the top half of the draft and then get more in-depth into these teams next week when we actually do the mock draft. Your Dolphins then at 13.
Yeah.
You mentioned you'd love to see Ezekiel Elliott fall to them at 13, which is possible.
Outside chance. Yeah. If he can make it past the Eagles and the Giants, I think that he'll fall to them. So those are the two big ones. And I can't really see the Giants taking him, and I think the Eagles take a quarterback. So I think there's a okay chance, maybe 40% chance.
Pass rush is certainly a possibility here, I think, for the Dolphins. If either one of those Clemson DNs fall to them, I think that's possible. I think you even mentioned in your article, you kind of talked about that. I think you said Kevin Dodd would actually be a pretty good fit for this defense.
Yeah, I think cornerback is the best overall direction for Miami. They desperately need cornerback help. They should have taken one last year, but they didn't in the first round. Should have taken Marcus Peters, but they didn't listen to me. So live and learn, I guess. Maybe they will, but I think William Jackson here or one of the Clemson defensive ends. I prefer Lawson, but Dodd also fits really nicely in case he's the best one on the board. So those would be my three guys if Elliott's off the board. And quite frankly, even if Elliott's on the board, I'm perfectly fine with taking either Lawson or William Jackson as well. As much as I love Zeke, I just think that those two guys play more important positions.
And I'm still a fan of Jay.
Yeah, me too, and that's part of it too.
Yeah. So, yeah. Yeah, so it was a little surprising to see them go like kind of full speed ahead for a guy like C.J. Anderson in free agency, and obviously they almost got him, but then Denver decided to match the offer, which was pretty surprising, considering they could have just slapped, say, a second round tender on him. Now all of a sudden you're committing more money to him, but that's a topic for another day. Then we get to the Raiders at 14. This is also, you mentioned if Zeke falls a little bit, this could potentially be a landing spot too for Ezekiel Elliott if he were to fall. I think pairing him with Latavius Murray, I think would be very nice for the Raiders. The Raiders might be in a position, the way they're building their team, did very well in free agency. They could be in position to go best player available here and really start to position themselves to potentially make a run to the playoffs this season. So I think the Raiders are in good position here.
Yeah, definitely. I think this is the absolute floor for Ezekiel Elliott. I think this would be a wonderful fit. If for some reason he slides by those three teams, which again, it wouldn't shock me, this would be the best landing spot for him, I think. But they also could go ahead. They could add another pass rusher or defensive end. Sheldon Rankins has been talked about. I like Chris Jones personally out of Mississippi State. Robert Kimdiche is probably going to be a second-round pick, so he might not be in the fold here. But, you can talk about those type of players who are more upside-type guys who may not come in and play and start right now, but they can play a specialty role. And you put them in that specialty role, and they're gonna excel in that small dosage that you get them on the field. And then guess what? When you're starting to get them on the field as a second and third year player, you're going to reap the rewards of taking a slower approach with them, as they're going to be a little bit more consistent because you slow baked them before you stuck them in the role. So I think they're in a great position. They could also use cornerback help and safety help as well. There's probably not going to be a safety on the board worth this pick, so maybe cornerback. Eli Apple would make sense. So would a guy like William Jackson if he's somehow still on the board too.
And I know it's safeties. It seems like, obviously Ramsey's at the top. But then when you get into the second round, it seems like the value is starting to be there a little bit. There's a lot of talk about Darian Thompson of Boise State as a potential solid safety for someone in the second round.
Definitely.
The Los Angeles Rams, which I'm still getting used to saying, at 15. A lot of people are going to peg them to take a wide receiver because they become the St. Louis / Los Angeles, let's just draft every receiver imaginable Rams. But if a guy like Paxton Lynch is there, if one of the quarterbacks is there, they've got to consider him. They've got to consider taking some kind of quarterback in this draft because you cannot go, not just going into the season, but going into your first season back in Los Angeles, back in the second biggest media market in the country, with Case Keenum as your starting quarterback. Because Lord knows this team will not be competitive. It's almost like they want to go 7-9 every single year because right now they're doing a damn good job of it. The way this roster is right now, they very well could go 7-9 again for the next 4 years. And when their new stadium is built, it'll be like, hey, welcome truly back to Los Angeles. And it's just a mess right now if you're a Rams fan. It's hard to feel good about this team if they don't take a quarterback.
Yeah, if they have the chance to get Paxton Lynch, I think they've got to sprint to the board and take him. He's my number 2 quarterback. I think he's a perfect fit for them with Todd Gurley. I think that'd be a lot of fun also with Tavon Austin. If he's off the board, then maybe you look at a guy like Josh Doxson at wide receiver. Maybe even you force a pick like Connor Cook. I'm not a huge Connor Cook fan, but I think he's the next best guy available. And I think he can be a decent starting quarterback too. I don't think he can be a great player. I don't think he'll be an above average player, but can he be maybe 2014 version of Andy Dalton? Yeah, I think so. And for them, that's a major upgrade. It really would be a major upgrade. And so he's inconsistent, but there are things that you like. He can make some great throws at times. And so, again, you have to improve that quarterback position. You can't just let it stay still with guys like Nick Foles and Case Keenum. So we'll see if they end up aggressive. It's not the MO of this regime to be aggressive. So it would be a little bit surprising, but I think it's the right move.
And I was actually just going to mention something. You brought up they're not aggressive, but there is also the possibility too that they go a position other than quarterback at 15, and then trade back end of round one, and maybe take a quarterback because they do have 2 picks in the second round. Maybe they use one of those picks to jump back into the back end of round 1, potentially ahead of a team like the Broncos. Yeah. Who may also be eyeing a quarterback if one's sitting there at 31. And then we'll wrap this up talking about the Detroit Lions. Could certainly use improvement on that defense a little bit. Maybe they could shore up the offensive line in this draft. Maybe another receiver. Running back at some point in the draft. Probably not in the first round, but maybe at some point in the draft. So, Lions will be another interesting team to watch. Coming off the Calvin Johnson retirement and how they go forward with that. Yeah, they got Marvin Jones. We'll see how they continue to react off that.
Yeah, this is a situation. Like you said, they could improve the trench play with the defensive tackle. They can improve the tackle play on offense. They went after Calvin Beachum. They went after Russell Okung. So what's kind of their plan of attack? Do they want to move Riley Reid over Riley Reef over from left tackle to right tackle, or what's kind of the plan there? That's going to be the really important question for them. And they could also go wide receiver. They definitely could use another wide receiver with Megatron gone. They could have used another receiver even with Megatron. So it's going to be tough for them, I think, to sit there and which premium position do you want? Do you want the offensive line, or do you want the defensive line, or do you take a bit of a luxury pick at wide receiver? Quite frankly, I kind of lean towards taking a trench player here, shoring up that offensive line or defensive line, building that way, and coming around maybe in the second or third round, grabbing a receiver, and then maybe grabbing another receiver on day 3.
And so with that, I think we'll wrap things up. I think we did pretty well there, going through 16 teams. Obviously we'd be here a while going through all 32, but I think top 16 is pretty good. And like I said, we'll be going through all 30. Well, technically 31 picks because the Patriots don't have a first round pick, but I'm sure we'll sneak the Patriots in there somewhere. But yeah, so good show tonight, and again, next week is the big mock draft with Chris Burke and John Ledyard. So definitely want to tune in for that. I think it's going to be really fun. Really excited to hear the perspective of those two along with us, and just see how the board falls out. So, anything else you want to add, Ian?
That's about it. Just really cool to see the Miami Heat blow a 20-some point lead. They got a lot of trash talkers on Twitter, and their team is trash. So looking forward to them getting beat in the first round of the playoffs.
Yeah, looking at the scores as we stand now, looks like the Heat are going to lose to the Celtics. Hornets beat the Magic. Hawks are losing to the to the Wizards. So we'll see what that means for the playoffs, because I know there was a lot of possibilities, and obviously when you guys listen to us, the playoffs will already be set, so you already know what the matchups are. But I know Miami could have been anywhere from 3 to 6. But I'm actually searching quick on SB Nation, their kind of flow chart that they created for the East playoff predictions. And well, they might still end up as a 3 seed nonetheless.
Yeah, looks like they will, since the Hawks are losing. But
they're probably
that's all right, though. Backing into the playoffs.
Looks like they're going to draw Charlotte in the first round, and it'll be the Hawks against the Celtics. So, and of course, like I said to you off air, good luck to your Cavs against the Pistons, and good luck to the Rockets against the Warriors in round 1. Hope you can stay within 20 points in these games. But yeah, so for all you guys out there, enjoy the NBA playoffs, enjoy the Stanley Cup playoffs. Baseball season has started. Phillies are kind of meh, as expected. And then, like I said, get ready for next week for the big mock draft. So for my buddy Ian Wharton, Bill Rossetti saying thanks as always for listening to us and enjoying. If you want to hit us up, let us know what you think of the show. Let us know if you have any questions or anything. At NFL Film Study, at Bill_Rossetti. Thanks so much for listening, guys, and we'll see you next time right here on GG. Take care, everybody.